Hey, it's Benji Cole, son of Al Cole from CBS Radio and host of the syndicated talk show, People of Distinction. The talk that gives you an in-depth view of some of the most dynamic, intelligent, and successful people on the planet. Run to our website, alcoleenterprises.com for more info. Email me directly through benji@alcoleenterprises.com if you'd like to get involved with what we have going. And as always, please continue to like and follow our broadcasts. People of Distinction is an internationally syndicated show solely due to the love and support that you all continue to show. We're available across all major podcast distributors, and like I mentioned, people, if you keep following, we're going to continue to put out the content. Now sit back and strap in because we are delighted to showcase this next guest on our network. And on the line with us today, we have the impressive Geraldine Morris Pinkston, PhD. Now we're going to be discussing Jerry's amazing book, God Called, She Answered. Moving past history and tradition into ministry leadership. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's a lot of other places. But to gather everything that she has in store, check out her personal website, and that's canvasministry.com. There you're going to gather more information on Jerry, more information on this amazing book, as well as find a hyperlink set up to take you to the purchasing pages. Once again, that's canvasministry.com. And people, listen to me when I tell you, it is an absolute pleasure to have Jerry here on the line. Right there in the title, you have an idea of what we're discussing today, but I promise you an idea is all you have. We are going to scratch the surface here today, but there is going to be much more left below the surface of the water. God Called, She Answered is going to be a captivating book that is going to have you looking at things a little bit differently. When we look at the Bible, when we look at the world, really, for that matter, I don't think I'm going out of the way here by saying we live in a patriarchy, right? We live in a world that is dominated by men and has always been viewed through the lens of a male perspective. Well, the Bible is no different. It is a history book written by men, told by men, written for men. And although there are women found within it, we know that there are not enough women showcased, especially when it comes to ministry. Jerry is the person of distinction because she is here to showcase a lot of what she has done and her particular background in ministry. And I'm telling you, man, she's got the voice of God within her, and she is a captivating individual in her own right. And this is one that you are thoroughly going to be benefited by adding to your shelf. And at the end of the day, Jerry is the expert, so let's bring her here with us, okay? Jerry, first and foremost, welcome to People of Distinction, and thank you very much for being a guest. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, fantastic. Jerry, listen, I love what you've done here. What you've comprised is something special and something that a lot of people need to be aware of. And you and I spoke briefly about this on the pre-screening call before we got on the line here, but we know that this is a world dominated by men. And when you look at the Bible, let's call a spade a spade. It was written by men. It talks about a lot of the history of men, and women are there, but they are not showcased nearly to the same degree. So I love what this book represents, and I love what it can mean for those listening in and for the future of church and religion and what that looks like. So this is something that I think, again, is going to open a lot of people's eyes and shift some perception here. So again, thank you for being a guest here with us to discuss all of it. Let's jump right in, okay? Your title, God Called, She Answered, Moving Past History and Tradition into Ministry Leadership. Well, I'm curious to know, Jerry, how does it reflect the heart of your book?
Well, hopefully it raises the question, or curiosity in people. God called, she answered. We would think about God calling and a male answering, but we don't always think about a woman answering that call. So it really is to have people focus in on, yes, what happens if God calls a woman? And also the traditions and some of the things that have happened that make perfectly good sense in the day and time that they happened, or if there's a question about it, but may not be as clear cut as people think that they are, that women should not be preaching or teaching. And there are different reasons for that, which I cover in the book. It highlights the difficulty of women just trying to resolve the dilemma of, should I go ahead if I really feel like I'm called? Should I not go ahead? Is the ministry that I'm in open to me being able to go down that path? So it's very complicated and very complex, and I really appreciate that. Hope that people will sense that, my sensitivity toward that.
Follow-up question now that I want to go into is a two-part question here. Okay, Jerry, first and foremost, who would you say is your intended reader for this book? And secondly, what are you hoping that they take away from it after they've completed it?
Well, first of all, I think that it's for women and men. It looks like, and even the cover, a male may look at it and say, "Oh, that's for women. I'm not going to read that." But it really is for men and women. The woman is on there because I'm female. But just to be more open to the possibility that God is sovereign and He'll call whomever He wants. So He knew I was a woman. He knows other women that are being called. He's not confused about genders. Mm-hmm. And so if He called, we have to make a decision to go forward. And the audiences can be broken down actually into all women who are called to ministry leadership, any man that's in a leadership position and he's having the responsibility of determining who's going to be in leadership and who's not going to be, students in classes that are preparing, to go into ministry. It gives a different insight for them. Mm-hmm. Young women and teenage girls that are sensing that there's a call, because I've talked to some of those that they're not quite sure, but they really feel this pull toward God. Husbands of women who are called to ministry who, have some questions about that. Families that we're a part of. Members of congregation who are struggling with whether women should be in leadership or not. Anyone who desires to know more about the history and perceptions and the stereotypes that are attributed to women, I think would benefit from reading this book.
Okay. So I'm following what you're saying here, Jerry. My follow-up now, the next question that I'd like to go into is, what are some of the indicators for knowing that you're even being called?
Well, it can be dreams. You can have visions, and different people have their calling is shown in different ways. And so you may have people who come to you who have a particular prophetic gift, meaning that they are really connected in a very spiritual way with God, so that they can say to you, you should move forward here, or you should preach, or whatever. So it could be any of those things. Sometimes, there's this inner feeling, this inner impulse that says, I'm supposed to be doing something, and it's supposed to be more spiritual. It's supposed to be related to God. I don't know exactly what it is. I don't even know if I want to do it, but I can't avoid it. It's non-ending. There's a general definition that's from Webster, and it says it's a strong impulse toward a particular course of action, especially when accompanied by a conviction of divine influence. So that's kind of nice, sophisticated way of saying it. But it's something that doesn't let up. And when God, what I found in my life is when God wants you, when He calls you, that you can do it the easy way or the hard way, and you can resist it as long as you feel like you could. I resisted it for 13 months, and the impulse became stronger, and His influence and His presence became stronger. And by the end of that 13 months, I was saying, God, I don't know exactly what you want me to do, but whatever it is, I'm going to go forward. It was just that strong and that powerful.
Well, Jerry, okay, so we recognize the indicators now. What advice would you offer to young women out there listening and who have a sense, or maybe even have been told, that they have a ministry call?
I would first of all say, pray like never before and ask God to confirm it, because He does. He'll send someone, he'll give you a dream or several dreams. I was riding down the highway, and there was a sign that answered a question that I had about being called. And God works in, some people say, mysterious ways, and some of them are, but this isn't as mysterious as it is that He wants you to be sure about it. And at the end of my calling period, or Him calling me, I honestly, He'd given me so many indications that I was afraid to ask Him one more time, God, are you sure? Because I was really feeling like, okay, now He's given me all of these really, really impactful kinds of things. And so I tell them to allow their circle to increase, because the people that are in your lives from the time that you are very young and become friends and spouses and those kinds of people are very important. And there's a reason for them to be in your life. But God may increase that circle. And also what may happen, and I want people to prepare for this, is that He may remove some people or call some people to step back, because they may not be able to go on the road that He's calling you to go on. And that's a very, very difficult thing if you're really close to someone. But if He removes some people, He also puts some people in your path that will help you to continue moving along the way that He wants you to go. So those are some of the things I would say is keep praying, look for confirmation or affirmation of what you're going to do, and trust that God has the road for your life and that His road is perfect. So it can be difficult, but it's worth the challenge. It's certainly worth the challenge.
Jerry, transitioning now back into the book, do you think that there is a particular chapter or passage you think readers should reflect on deeply? And if so, why?
That was a hard question, because there are a number of different portions of a chapter, a particular chapter. I would say one of the best chapters, I would say to begin with particularly, is the chapter 1, where it talks about being called. And some of the indicators that one of the famous ministers came up with 6 indicators of how you know that you're being called. And when I went through all 6 of them, I could identify a time in my life where that had been the case for me, and God had pulled me in through that particular indicator. Moving forward in your call is not about pride or a false sense that your talents are better than anyone else's. It's not about the thrill of, this competition, forming these teams and let's keep score on who's better or worse, males or females. It's not about attempting to prove that anything that men can do, women can do better. It's really not about any of those things. It's about following the call that God places on us. And if it's in a church and if it's in teaching or preaching, then we can't dismiss that easily, even though people around us may do that. Moving forward is not about it's not about exclusive equality, although there are times and places where He wants us to be equal. Men have certain strengths, women have certain strength, and it's about coming together. And that's outlined, I said, primarily in chapter 1. Chapter 4 is another one, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But simply wanting to follow God's will, and that's throughout the book, but particularly in those chapters.
Well, listen, I'm just going to point out, she selected specific chapters here. I'm going to go even further. People, those chapters are great, but this entire book is a resource that needs to be added to your shelf, all right? I'm going to say it for you once again. It's Amazon, it's Barnes & Noble, it's a whole host of other places. Check out canvasministry.com because it really is a one-stop shop for it all. Again, we're here on the line with Geraldine Morris Pinkston, PhD. She is someone that is beyond impressive. And her book, God Called, She Answered, is one that needs to be added to your shelf. A follow-up question now that I would like to go into here, Jerry. Your book offers a lot of wisdom. In one section in the book, it covers an old adage that we are all very familiar with, right? The phrase, caught between a rock and a hard place. Well, I want to ask you now, what are the dangers of being caught between a rock and a hard place that you describe in your book?
So this is in chapter 4, and the idea, I can't even tell you where it came from, but it kind of came to me as I was working on the latter chapters. And so chapter 4 starts with two quotes, one from me, and it's a question. What should you do when the church you attend greets you with, oh, women don't preach or have primary teaching roles in this house? And I found an answer, and this is an anonymous writer, and the answer that I chose to put with the question was, he says, don't worry. God has gone before you and has prepared the way. Just keep walking. And I guess if there was a phrase that I would say, through the difficulties of life in general, or ministry responsibilities, or those kind of things, you have to just keep walking. And so it talks about other cultures. In the chapters, it talks about other cultures from the beginning of times, the Babylonian times, Assyrian. It talks about those influences. It talks about Bible characters like Eve, who some people have written to say that, she's responsible for all the sin in the world. And so since she's a woman, then women are inherently evil. There were respected rabbinical writers because the Old Testament, God and the people that he chose originally were Jewish, and so I really did resort to a number of Jewish resources and so forth, and also have been studying that because it just opens up a whole new window of understanding. Men who've been accepted as experts, including, people that we consider church fathers and reformers and philosophers, all of these men have had different ideas about women, and some of the ideas have been very, they've been very difficult, and particularly if you're trying to figure out who you are. And so the effect of some of these teachings have really made a woman very insecure about who she is and who she should be. So in a place, it's placed some of the women in what you might call a state of suspension between the rock, which in the Bible is talks about God in Deuteronomy, and the hard place. So do I do what I really feel God wants me to do that I haven't been able to shake? Do I follow the thinking of a number of leadership persons that says, but you can do bake sales, and you can fry chicken, and you can pray, but you really can't be in charge of men. So that's kind of the dilemma of what do you do, because you can end up being very in disagreement with God. And if I have to be in disagreement with man or with God, each person has to decide which one they're going to choose. I have begun more and more and learned over these years that I have to go with God, and then he has to change the minds of people if that's indeed what he wants to do.
Exactly. That's I think you're onto something there, Jerry. I love it. What would you say are some of the special qualities that women bring to leadership that are both blessings and, of course, sometimes challenges?
Okay, and there's a chapter that talks quite a bit about gender differences. So we have history, we have different portions of the book, but this particular chapter talks about gender differences. And there's been a lot of research on brain differences and even activity when they did pictures of women's brains and men's brains, and part of what they said was that women's brains almost never turn off. There's always this activity going on, and that women oftentimes there's that feeling component that sympathetic component that's always there, along with whatever thinking and analytic ability that we have. So it's almost like you're working on more cylinders, and that can be more complicated. So there was a Dr. Carol Kinsey Goldman who did an interesting study less than 10 years ago. And she talked about communication strengths and weaknesses for both men and women. So just very briefly, women, she felt, excelled in listening skills, exhibiting empathy, and reading body language and nonverbal cues, which is very important. Men's strengths she saw as being commanding a physical presence, interacting in a direct manner, and effectively displaying power. The areas of concern that she saw for women was the perception of them being overly emotional, which we know about that. Not getting to the point fast enough, we know about that. And not being authoritative. And the principal weaknesses for men, as she saw them in her research, were they're not as sensitive as they could be to their audience when things are going on in the audience that women might pick up, men may not. Responding in an overly direct, blunt manner, so not having as much empathy as some women may have in this particular situation, and exhibiting some overconfidence in their own options. So just in terms of communication, and of course there are exceptions to these, as there are to many of the things that are written both in my book and anyone's book. But when you think about it, and you think about your audience, you have, most churches have more women actually that are on the membership roll than men. And so that's a large audience. And so you have to be to combine them. And men shouldn't be expected to have to do all of those things at all times. And then the things that might be deterrents for the audience that come from women, that's why it's important to be working together.
You know, Jerry, I love what you're saying here. Men and women are so complementary to one another. And when we can find that harmony, it's truly when we're able to grow and advance. And listen, I think that is a great segue, a perfect segue into my next question here, because I'm curious to know, Jerry, in your opinion, who loses when males and females are unable to use their talents collectively and respectfully in leadership?
So I kind of went down the role. So women, I think, particularly those who are called into leadership, if they're not able to use their ability, they're only giving a portion of what God's given them to use. So they're not showing up fully. God's intentions, if they start to doubt God's intentions for them, then they may pull back from what they need to be doing and what he wants them to do. And ultimately, that's going to affect the congregation. That doubting can result in them distancing from God and stepping into a place of disobedience. And I just want to say that that's a dangerous place to be in. For men leaders, they may miss the opportunity of being more effective or having a more effective ministry that has the women operating in their gifts and the males operating their gifts. They may not be reaching the segment of the congregation, like I said, for women who might have been abused, and may not be able to really hear this male standing in front of them and giving them wisdom, even though he is giving it to them. They may need that woman to come alongside and acknowledge what they've been through, but also say, but this is also what you must do in terms of what God calls you to do. They may lose if their trust in God doesn't outweigh negative opinions from the congregation. So, they're trying to open up their minds, they're trying to do the right thing, but there are these negative opinions that come from the congregation. Some of those are the most outspoken people. And they may lose if the enemy's given, to give the enemy liberty to stir up insecurity, that, their authority is going to be jeopardized because a woman wants to take your place. So that confidence thing is important. The congregation might lose because people are watching and they are taking in what they've learned about women preaching and teaching, and they're watching to see if there's a difference and if that's accepted in that place. The women may be afraid that their husbands won't take a woman preacher seriously. The parishioners may lose, they may go on autopilot. And because a woman is preaching, so because she's preaching, because they're looking at it as a woman, they may shut down what she has to say, where they would be to hear that if it were male. And then our young people who are watching, and they're kind of caught in the middle of it. For young boys, and I'm talking about boys in elementary school, they may walk away with the impression that I'm a male, so the world's going to be open to me, and I don't have to put in the work, I don't have to do my best. And a female that's very young may say, well, you know, I'm not supposed to do this, and I don't see any other women doing that, or I see very few women doing that, and so maybe I shouldn't go into this field or go into ministry. So those are some of the things that at least I sense could be happening in terms of people losing when we don't balance this a little bit more.
Jerry, you have offered so much fantastic pieces of information here today. People, I'm telling you, this book is the precipice to a lot. But remember, it's only the beginning. A lot still needs to be done and to continue to work towards after it. But it starts with God Called, She Answered by Geraldine Morris Pinkston. It's Amazon. It's Barnes & Noble. It's canvasministry.com. Head on over there today. Pick up your copies and get lost in it. Trust in the fact that we have barely scratched the surface here today, and there is a lot left to be discovered. You know where to go. Pick up your copies today and do just that, man, because Jerry is onto something special, and her words need to be recognized, need to be heard. And this is a fantastic gift to add to someone else's shelf as well. Let's spread the word. It starts here, though. Jerry, this has been a true pleasure, an absolute honor. Once again, thank you for being here with us and showcasing this magnificent book through our network, People of Distinction.
And thank you.